what I do is fairly visual, so to do it voice only is quite difficult. I need a horse to sort of gesture and pull its tail. And,
Who was it? We got someone on that they thought they were going to be. Was it Claire the first time we got her on about prohibited substances? We'd had someone request
what substances?
Prohibited substances.
Okay.
Claire Williams from
who did
Beta.
the Beta episode that you listened to, but we did one at badminton, and Claire Williams, and someone requested an episode on drug awareness in sport, and so we contacted her, and she was like, "Would not be a little bit dry?" We were like, "No, we're fine. I'm sure we're fine."
Interesting.
And we were just sat there like,
I feel like drug stuff, like, it's the sort of like naughty side of the sport that everyone wants to know about. So everyone's like, no one wants to actually use the prohibited substances, but everyone's like, what can you use and what does it do? Like, she was talking about...
And they don't want to tell their personal stories about when they have to use it.
Yeah, so like we were talking...
you can't go find someone that's been caught using drugs. You do find someone that...
And she was talking about horses in Australia, because they have to have they have kind of an okay amount of copper that they can have in their system, but above that it's not okay. And we were like, why copper? And apparently it increases your body's ability to withstand pain, which I think is why you get copper bracelets for arthritis.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
And that sort of thing, like, you really want to know that stuff. You really want to know
how would you get
what
copper into your horse through...
You feed it to them, I think.
Yeah.
But like you want to know how, like, you want to know like
Does
how
that come
to do
out in
it.
a urine test or a blood test?
Blood test, I think. But like that, you wouldn't do it obviously because it's prohibited. But you want to know.
You want to know how close you are to it.
Yeah.
It's like testosterone. My daughter's a professional athlete down in Bath. You know, the testosterone levels for humans is between for females between 0 and 5, and I think for a male it's something like between 10 and 25 or something. So there's that grey, and obviously there's the Semenya, whatever her name is, and with her testosterone levels, and it's the whole, they all want to be on
right
5,
at the top,
but doing that legally and knowing where you are and how you get there, and is it really an advantage?
But that's what people want to know. Yeah. You want to know the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should get started.
So, hello and welcome to the episode of the Pony Podcast. Today we've come to talk to Anna Davison, who is a equine chartered physiotherapist.
It's what the deliberate mistake.
And one job.
Welcome, Anna, to the Pony Podcast.
Thank you.
You've locked your phone with all the questions on it.
The first question we're going to ask you is, how long have you been a physiotherapist?
Well, as far as, obviously I'm an equine chartered physiotherapist now, but I qualified as a human physiotherapist back in '88, so that's 30 odd years ago, which is a bit scary. But as far as treating horses go, I was fully qualified. So I was an ACPACT Category A member about 1993, so 25 years ago.
What made you change disciplines from humans to horses?
I only ever wanted to treat horses. So I think psychogeriatrics and paediatrics and everything that I did while I was training, I sort of grinned and bared it. But I knew even before I trained as a human physiotherapist that I only ever wanted to treat animals, and predominantly horses.
Yeah.
You're talking about the ACPAT, the category, what does that mean? What does that stand for?
ACPACT is the Association of Chartered Physiotherapists in Animal Therapy. So it's a specialist group. So physiotherapists can be members of different specialist groups, and I'm a member of ACPACT because they govern or edit. So ACPACT is our specialist interest group within the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy.
And it's much easier to say than the first bit.
So there's two different levels. So vets and students and various people can become Category B members, but Category A means that you are doing your CPD, you're insured, you're qualified to treat horses and dogs and other animals, depending on your scope of practice. My scope of practice currently only covers horses. Historically, I have treated cattle and cats and dogs.
Why cattle? Like, cats and dogs I kind of get, but why cattle?
Cattle, it was a very valuable cow that had, I think, probably more neurological problems, and physiotherapy probably wasn't appropriate, but some people will go to any lengths to help when other more conventional methods of treatment have not worked.
Aww.
So What does your average day look like as a physio?
Oh, I just don't have an average day. I think you were anticipating that probably.
Yes.
I guess my day would start with going to visit my own horses, and that might be sort of putting on fly rugs or taking off rugs, and that's a sort of a brief visit in the morning, and then I will head out. I'm not really a morning person, and I think most of my clients usually chuckle when they receive
I'm very happy with that.
possibly, but it means that they might be receiving an email from me at sort of midnight, and they sometimes...
Yeah, I did notice that.
So yeah, a little bit nocturnal, which probably isn't very compatible with Badminton, which is a very sleepy village. So I'll come home at sort of 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and the whole village is dead quiet, and I'm tippy-toeing in. But I'm not brilliant in the mornings. So that's how my day would start, and then I would perhaps get to my first client. I might tell them I'd be there at 9, but I'm notoriously 15 minutes late. So I might get to them at about sort of 9:15, and then the rest of the day just goes depending on what I've got booked in my diary, which can be hugely variable, but I love that. So in the afternoon might be spent watching my son play rugby, and then on a Sunday I might well be back working again. So I completely juggle my day to fit me personally, and people say, oh, thank you so much for coming out, and I'm thinking, no trouble to me, because I book my diary as it suits me, and that's what I love, because it's so flexible.
Yeah. So why do horses need to be seen by a physio?
Well, my mother keeps asking me that question, and I give her the same answer every time. Like any athlete, they can become sore, and they start compensating, and they compensate for numerous reasons, whether it's crooked jockeys or poor shoeing. Obviously, there's saddle fit, teeth, there's numerous reasons. And obviously all those reasons need to be addressed before physiotherapy is really appropriate. So those sorts of problems I might classify as secondary. So there's been a problem, and as a consequence of that, the horse has compensated. So I'm then going in to treat the way that they've adapted their gait, and I'm then treating compensatory patterns. What I prefer doing is treating horses when they've slipped or skidded, maybe they've got cast, maybe you've had to slam your brakes on in the lorry and the horse has skidded, maybe it's got tangled in a jump. There's numerous reasons, and mostly we never really know what has caused the problem. So it's
So I've had one of those. I had one of my horses that you treated, Phoebe. She had never had a lame day in her life. She was vetted by someone to buy, and she was like 1/10, half a tenth lame. And she'd been out in the field all morning and got quite stressed. And what it ended up being was that she'd tweaked something in the field.
Oh, annoying.
And that was it. And I was like, this horse is so sad.
yeah, and they can be mildly lame. Normally, if someone phones me up and they say the horse is lame, I'm not the person to
Get a
see
vet.
them. Exactly, and that's really important. There are so many people out there to use as part of your team. So I will have a conversation with people over the phone to make sure I am the right person. When I visit, am I the right person to be seeing that horse? And I think that's really important. But yeah, there's lots of reasons. They developed soreness in their muscles because of compensating, and that's what I treat predominantly. So I might be treating muscle soreness, but that muscle soreness, some professionals might see that as poor alignment from a skeletal point of view, and there's a massive overlap between how different professions treat a problem. So a chiropractor might look at joint dysfunction, but I might go in, a lot of people might think that physiotherapy is just about muscles, but you can't isolate the two. So I would be treating muscles, but that influences joints, influences fascia. So there's a massive overlap in what I do with other professionals.
So my horse has a wonky pelvis, and she fell over when she was a foal. It's never affected her. It doesn't affect her now. She does perfectly well with it. But the one piece of advice I was given by our vet when we brought her over was, he kind of looked at her and he was like, oh, her pelvis is wonky. And I was like, oh yeah, and hadn't really noticed. And he was like, if anyone ever tells you they can fix it, fire them. Don't let them touch her, because they can only fix it by re-breaking her pelvis. And I was kind of like, okay, sure, yes, fine. And there's been several people who've been like, oh yeah, I see that her pelvis is wonky, and I'm always like, yeah, but you can't change it. It's fused now.
So
that's
right.
how it is.
No, that's absolutely right. And I see a lot of horses with asymmetric pelvis, and you see them competing at the very
Yeah.
highest level, and it definitely wouldn't put me off buying a horse. I have to say I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I would rather my horse was completely symmetrical, and luckily my two are. Otherwise, I think I would be obsessively, compulsively sort of looking at them
I
every
am
day.
so like meticulous about she's always worked evenly on both reins, and the leg that stands a little bit out from her body, like it's either worked a little bit harder or she has to push completely evenly into both of my reins, and she has to be completely straight all the time, and it really drives me mad when I ride other people's horses and they're not straight, because I'm like, you have no excuse.
So what you're saying really is muscle development is more important.
Yeah, and
that's
it
so
does
true.
even her up.
Yeah.
She's straighter when she's strong and when she's had a
Yeah.
holiday or something.
Yeah, I think there are some times when you can get a horse's pelvis more symmetrical. I remember when I first started, I contacted Ian Cam at B&W, and he got a pelvis down off the shelf, and I was sort of, I'm talking years and years ago, and he said, what do you do when a horse's pelvis is I can't remember exactly what the question was, and I said, there is nothing you can do. The sacroiliac joint is is fused, and it's a very strong joint, and actually if you could mobilise it, that horse probably wouldn't be standing, because that joint has to transmit the whole, when it canters, the whole weight of the horse goes through, a shearing force goes through that joint. So there isn't a lot of movement. But where I think you can get horses more symmetrical is when this is where I normally gesture, but you can't see this, but you could get a tiny bit of rotation at each of the lumbar vertebrae in front of that. So by getting them correct in front of the lumbar sacral junction, I think sometimes then you can make them look a little bit more symmetrical through their pelvis.
Okay, that's really interesting.
So what are the most common problems that you come across when you treat horses?
I think I tend to be treating the same thing, but I think the causes of those problems are very different. And as I touched on earlier, they may be because the horse is compensating crooked jockey, which is quite topical at the moment. Saddle fit, crucial. Shoeing, again, crucial. And the horse will adapt its way of going depending on what is influencing it. So I always use the analogy, if you're walking along and you suddenly get a stone in your shoe, you don't carry on walking as if you're comfortable. You might just then walk on your heel, and you'll look very lame, but actually you'll be very comfortable. And horses will do the same. They will take the easiest route, and they don't care if they get a 4 for their centre line or an 8 for the centre line. If it's more comfortable for them, they'll swing their quarters one way, or they might tilt their head, because they just want to be comfortable. So I will be treating what is making them uncomfortable, and my aim is to make horses as comfortable as possible so they can then do exercises and train and build up symmetrically. And there's numerous reasons why they might be wrong.
So we've talked a little bit about the different things that people that are out there to help with supporting your horse's development and that sort of thing. But what is the difference between like a physio, a chiropractor, an osteopath, bone therapist, McTimoney, all the others that are out there?
That's a really
quite a broad question.
typical question I get asked. I guess I can mainly speak from my experience, and that would be that although I'm trained as a physiotherapist, I also, after I qualified as a human physiotherapist, I spent a lot of time with a chiropractor, a McTimoney chiropractor. Actually, she was a physiotherapist, but she used McTimoney techniques. So I learnt McTimoney techniques from her, and Sarah Arkle, became Sarah Stafford, was a major influence in me taking the route that I have, because she treated my horses before I qualified. So I think I call upon any technique that I think will work. I might use an osteopathic technique, I might use myofascial release, I'll use physiotherapy techniques, I'll use McTimoney chiropractic techniques. So I think there's a massive overlap between our professions, especially the chiropractic and physiotherapy professions. A year ago I worked with an osteopath, and so I've picked up some osteopathic techniques. This year, recently, I observed practice with a chiropractor. So a vet had asked me to see a horse who was already been seen by a chiropractor. So I said, can I come and watch? Let's exchange ideas. Less knowledge about Bowen therapists, but I think you've just got to keep learning and keep drawing on any technique that you think might work. So I've got more tools in my box, I'd like to think, to call on.
But say you had a horse that you thought might need treatment, how would you go about deciding who to contact?
Do you mean physiotherapy treatment, veterinary treatment, chiropractic treatment?
So say someone said you need to get a physio for your horse, but so friends recommended someone that's an osteopath. How do you decide who you should go to get for your horse? Does that make
Well,
sense?
I guess that's quite a tricky one. I'm not sure I totally understand
Sorry.
the question, but I think I've grown more confident over the years that I would like to think that I could help that horse. Occasionally I will refer to a chiropractor, and it's someone that I've worked with together, observed practice, and I think it depends on the owner. The owner often decides I need a chiropractor because I know that a chiropractor helped my friend's horse. I really want a physio because I know physiotherapy is the best, and it may not be the best, but I think it's owner driven. They usually have an idea in their mind who they want to use. But as I say, I think there's a massive overlap in the techniques that each of those professionals have. And I guess that comes with years of experience. Perhaps newly qualified physiotherapists might not have those chiropractic skills, but you've just got to keep learning. You've got to keep doing your CPD. You've got to never be too proud to want to think you can't learn from someone else. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question?
No, you did answer the question. It was more that I completely agree with you that a lot of people go to someone that's recommended by a friend without thinking, is it best for my horse?
Yeah.
And I was really pleased and surprised when I phoned you up and you said, am I the person that you need? Tell me what's wrong with your horse.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what if I say the wrong thing and she tells me I don't need her?
Well, I think there's so many more people out there, and certainly the first one to differentiate is does your horse need a vet? I probably don't differentiate between do you need a physio, an osteopath, or a chiropractor, because I think there's a big overlap. And I think ultimately, although we might use different techniques, I'd like to think we get to the same goal. Where I think I could sort of blast my own trumpet, if that's the right thing to say, is having trained in the NHS, I very much feel that we don't want a waiting list. I want to make people identify when the horse needs treatment, and I want them to self-manage. And hopefully that's something I came over when I was looking at your horses was, yes, I can make your horse more comfortable, but you ultimately are going to take that forwards to do the right exercises statically in the stable, dynamically out in the arena, but you are the one that is going to probably have the biggest influence, but that horse has to be comfortable in order for it to be able to do that. So I spend a lot of time educating people, teaching them exercises, and hopefully getting them to identify, I don't know what I said to you, but different people have different warning signs from their horse. It might be they don't like being girthed, it might be they point blank stop, it might be they buck, there could be all sorts of reasons. I had one client said my horse has stopped bucking and I know it's got a sore back, and I'm thinking, great, I'm going to be treating this horse because you want it to buck. But it's great when I've got owners that are very in tune with their horses and they know when it's wrong, and that's really lovely to have for them to be able to read that. It might be that they're a little bit heavier on one rein, or they're double tapping in their piaffe, or they just can't get the correct canter lead, and different owners will have different warning signs, and that's great because then I'm thinking they're calling me appropriately. And because I might say, well, you know, the next time you might need the dentist, you might need the farrier. It's a massive team out there, and I couldn't work as well as I do without that team, and everyone has an equal role to play.
Which areas have had the most active research recently?
There's so much research going on, and it's really exciting. A while ago they did some research on maximum weight for the jockey.
I was reading that. Well, I was reading a summary of
it.
I
think they sort of had to stop the research at one point, so perhaps didn't get the answer that we're all dying for. Saddle rider, horse interaction. I think what might influence me most is there was some research done 2010, 2011. Dr. Hilary Clayton, whose research I love, and I'm always sending out her information, she did some research using janglies, bracelets that you put around the horse's fetlocks at different levels, and it showed...
Is it you who's telling me about that?
You
I think
sent
so.
me some paper.
Oh, did I send you paper? I've become re-enthused by it because someone called Harrison has sort of gone back to that research and done her own research, and instead of using janglies, which you can put above the hock, above the fetlock, below the fetlock, and that's really important to look at the way that influences the horse. But the latest research, really simple, is just putting an overreach boot on the weakest leg. And I think I've sort of lost, I don't say I've forgotten, but things come in phases and fads, and I've sort of steered more towards pole work for proprioceptive feedback, and that's become massively topical, and I think it's brilliant. There are so many pole work clinics, but now I'm sort of going back to thinking, oh, maybe I can also help horses by helping clients choose which proprioceptive.
Anyone who's
deities.
listened to our episode on fitness knows I did like a lot of research into like the pole work, because pole work can be used to treat neurological issues as well, because it's really complex depth perception and like limb-eye coordination exercise, and also it helps with limb flexion, but it doesn't just help when they're over the poles. It continuously helps
with the boot or with the janglies or
with the
poles.
just over poles.
Really?
Yeah. So it's not like other exercises to increase limb flexion where with repetition you lose the effect. Pole work, because they always have to step over the poles, it always improves limb flexion, and then they develop those muscles and the limb flexion improves without the poles as well.
Okay, I can learn something from you as well. That's fantastic. I mean, something I try and get people to do if they're in their own yard is putting out some telegraph poles, because so much of the exercises I give there are fairly time consuming, and what I try and do is to help them incorporate that into their everyday routine. So a thoracic lift might be when they're doing up the girth, pelvic tilt when they slide their rugs off. But actually, if you're leading your horse out to the field, lead it out over 3 telegraph poles. The distance doesn't matter. You will be getting increased hock, stifle, flexion, and you're on the way out to the field anyway. So that proprioceptive input is fantastic. Get it through the gate, turn it round, tight turn one way, couple of steps of rein back, job done for the day.
I was riding at a yard a while ago, and they'd put like, railway sleepers in their walker.
Oh wow!
So that when the horses are walking round,
Health
they
and
had
safety
to
panic
look it up.
from me.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
small panic.
Yeah.
Well, they said that their physio might have suggested it was a good idea. There were other things that they were doing, because they were like, the physio said to do it, and it's done a really good. And they were like, I've actually noticed that the horses are a lot stronger because they had to put their feet up, but they were also using those the bands. So they had it was a horse that we were doing a bit of backing and breaking in, and they'd done it so they'd sewn on like little D rings to a numner.
Perfect.
And then clipped one under their stomach. So
Have
it was
I
just
not
touching.
sent you that information?
I think you mentioned it and I didn't know about it. And
I'll
then
send
another
you an email
one
soon
round
about
behind, and it was
Yeah.
they were saying that it's because they were having to break it in.
Yeah.
And it was all muscle to away anyway, so they were like, "Oh, we'll just get this muscles going while we're lunging it and working it."
Yeah. So what they're trying to do there is replicate what I try and encourage you to do in the stable. So with the thoracic lift and the pelvic tilt, you're trying to get the top of their backs to lengthen and their abdominals to shorten. So you're trying to get that bascule, that
Is that like what you do if you stand behind them and you put your like nails on the top of their bum and then you, not hard, but like pull your nails down?
Yeah.
Mine, I know some horses don't really react. Mine practically sits down when you do it because she's so like
Sitting down, I would want to see that, because as long as they are rotating their pelvis.
I might be exaggerating.
Well, some horses will collapse because they can't flex correctly.
Yeah.
I remember a polo pony, I went to do that, and instead of flexing and rotating its pelvis, it literally just tried to sit down to evade the movement. So you
I don't think she does that.
No, so it's actively tilting your pelvis. Yeah, and there's a different amount of stimulus. Each horse needs a different amount of stimulus, but that's exactly what you're trying to get, because that's what you want when you're doing your dressage test. You
It's
want
great.
that.
She's really, really short backed, and so getting the weight on the hind leg is like, it's like right there. It's really easy. Someone did tell me she's a bit hypermobile in her lumbar spine, so like it's
so
really
stability
easy.
then, and that's my key word. So what you perhaps should be working on is more stability rather than flexibility.
Definitely.
I remembered it. It was in my head.
And then we got laughing about my
one
horse.
exercise you could recommend.
I'm glad you said that, because that
That
follows
everyone-
on. So I think that the simplest exercise and probably the most beneficial would be a tail pull. And I know that baited stretches are really popular, and you see them in magazines, and everyone knows when you go there, they know their carrot stretches. So I'm assuming that people might do carrot stretches already, but the tail pull, to actually get those muscles firing in their hindquarters, I think is crucial. The research was done on the multifidus muscles, which are the muscles along the spine, and they ultrasound scanned and they did 70 tail pulls a day for X number of months, and they showed an increased bulk in the multifidus. So forget your top line cubes, which go to their tummies and don't necessarily build top line. Sorry, whoever makes top line cubes. But what I'm also think that you're getting with the tail pulls is not just multifidus firing and the core stability in the spine, but you're getting the muscles firing around their hind legs, because we want the centre of gravity to shift backwards, so we need stability in the hocks.
That's the same. Are they the same muscles that you can only really activate when you're riding by serpentining? Are they those ones? I went to a talk with Central Biomechanics. I might take this bit out. I went to a talk with Central Biomechanics, and I can't remember exactly what the muscle was called, but there's a muscle that runs alongside the spine, and you can only really activate it by carrot stretches and serpentines.
Working on a circle? Well, that could be your side flexors, so yes, it could be multifidus.
And it's that like changing bend and getting their rib cage to move.
is crucial, because muscles work in pairs. So when you work one muscle on one side of the spine, the others are going to be naturally lengthening. So when you change the rein, you can't see my hands here, but when you change the rein, you've got one muscle side of the spine working and the other side letting go. The more times you change rein, the more you get those antagonist pairs contracting and relaxing. And once you've got both sides of the spine contracting and relaxing, you can then expect both sides of the spine to lengthen, because that's ultimately what we want, to get the pelvis to tilt. We then want the antagonist pairs to be above and below. So you want the abdominals to fire and the back to let go. And that, I'm sure, doesn't come across on a podcast as well as it does in real life. But yes, so serpentines, loops, figures of 8 I often talk about. That's a really great way of getting a horse to relax over its back before you ask for collection. And I think all trainers and instructors would know that, but they perhaps maybe don't know the science behind it, or maybe I'm doing them a disrespect, but that is absolutely why when we warm a horse up, we should use lots of changes of rein and changes of pace as well.
Some of my favourite exercises to do. I sit in the school and I'm like, this is exactly this. I know why I'm doing this, and I know that it's helping my horse, and I feel really smug when I'm trotting them down doing my serpentines warming up.
I added some figures of 8 and some loops.
Next.
And some 10-metre circles. Don't be like my son, who, when we first got our dressage arena, sorry Charlie, he wanted to make a track round the outside like his local instructor. So he did sort of 20 loops round the outside till he'd made this nice track. So
Groove.
20 laps one way, 20 laps the other way, 10 jumps, and then I can go back to the house. No, so lots of changes of rein are really important.
Yeah, so we're coming sort of to the end of the interview, and got a set of questions that we ask everyone. So what's one thing that you couldn't live without day to day?
I guess my hands. Because
that is lucky. They are always hungry.
The great thing about sort of not being very good in the mornings is I can never forget my equipment, because they're right there. I rely on my hands. You can use them just to reassure a horse. I can use them to gesture to owners about their exercises. But obviously they are the tools of my trade, and it's taken years to train them and develop the nerve endings in them so that hopefully I can palpate things. But I couldn't live without my hands.
What's one thing you wish you'd learned sooner?
That is a really difficult question. I guess it's the need to learn. I think I wish that I'd done more courses, more CPD. I think I do more learning now than I perhaps did 20 years ago, and I think I find it just fascinating. I think the research that's happening at the moment is really exciting, and I just want to learn more, and I guess I wish I'd learnt that years ago. What was the question?
One thing you wish you'd learned sooner.
I learned to learn, I guess. It's just that I guess the other thing would be I wish I'd learnt to be more confident earlier, and now I'm passionate about what I do, and I think perhaps I lacked a little bit of conviction when I first started working, whereas now I don't doubt what I do because I know it works.
I think that would be mine. I think learning how to learn better, and learning how to be more passionate about what I'm learning about. That would be mine, because now I I'll read scientific papers for fun. Definitely never used to do that. It's definitely not a thing.
I think it just makes job satisfaction so much greater, doesn't it? When you can, well, I want to enthuse people, and if I say to people when I've said I'm not plucking these exercises out of the sky, they are evidence-based. I don't need to talk to you about Sue Dyson, Hilary Clayton, and all these wonderful people, because I don't do the research. And Sensual Biomechanics, Russell is just amazing, and I think that's so important.
Such a fan of his.
Such a fan.
He's gonna get,
we should start our little fan
at
club.
some point, he's going to get a restraining order, and it's going to be really embarrassing. Every
No.
time he gives a talk, I'm there like,
You can't get a restraining order.
tell me
to
again.
have him on the podcast too.
Oh yes, no, you must get him on your podcast. That would be amazing.
the last talk I went to of his was, I think, at the Pony Club conference, and he was kind of going through a bit of his research, and he kind of stopped the room and he was like, oh, so what do you think happens when we do this to a horse? And he like looked around the room and everyone was like, I don't know. And I was like, I know. And he was like, oh, what happens? I was like, I feel like I'm cheating because you told me last time.
Because I'm a groupie.
This is the third time I've had this talk. And it was a real, you could see him like, oh yeah.
No, he is amazing, and I think the fact that it's so independent and so professional, and I just, huge fan. Yeah. And if anyone listening to this podcast hasn't been to Sensual Biomechanics website,
he's
get
so
there
amazing. I am that person. I do have I'm very lucky in that I do have all Fairfax tack, and I have noticed such a difference in my horse.
But it has
such
to
a difference.
fit. You see, sometimes I see Fairfax tack or any tack. Other tack is available.
No, it's not. Get Fairfax tack.
But it has to fit, and I think people get carried away with
the
names,
brand,
and they think they need the top brands, mentioning no names. But actually, I don't mind what tack they have on their horse's
It's just
back.
got to fit.
It has to fit, and they mustn't feel intimidated that they can't spend £3,000 on the saddle, because far more importantly is it fits, and far more importantly is they are symmetrical, and they're going to their Pilates class, and that they're looking into the best interest of their horse. The teeth are being done and it's being shod. There's so many things that influence a horse, and physiotherapy is a tiny part of it.
We have a friend of ours, friend of the podcast, Kelly Jones, who's a bridle maker, and she is really hot on fitting tack. So if we're sitting watching Burley or badminton or something, she'll send us a screenshot like, their cheek pieces are too high. Their brow band doesn't fit.
Cheek pieces.
The cheek pieces are too
like
high.
She sent me an Instagram post of a rider, and I'm obviously not going to say who it was, but they have a fancy brow band, fancy headpiece of their tack, but it sits on the ears.
Yeah, so the brow band is too tight. My pet hate.
I think it's genuinely the headpiece. They've cut it's a fancy
designed
headpiece.
to be pressure release on the pole. But the way that it's fitted to the horse means that the large bits that are supposed to go around the ears are behind the ears.
But they've cut it right back on the pole.
Education is crucial, and I think that's what's great about what you're doing here, is if one person listens to me, then what I would want to say is, make sure the brow band is long enough. But my real pet thing is girths. People, and that comes back to Russell, is that if the girth is too short, the buckles, which I believe from research give the highest pressure points, if they're right behind the elbows, that's really where they're most sensitive. So make sure your girths are long enough and come up closer to the saddle.
Everyone always tells me my girth is too long because it sits just below the saddle.
That's where it should be.
Yeah,
Tell
it's
them.
been fitted
Say,
by a
ask
saddler.
Russell. We should start a catchphrase. Ask Russell.
He's not going to like that. He's going to get so many messages.
He's going to be so creeped out when he comes to the podcast. So we've got a hashtag for you.
Can we have a fan club? Can it be in a stadium where we can all listen to him? No, he's incredible.
He's okay. All right.
Okay.
Do we have another question?
The last one's a hard one. I mean, you can answer it if you want. It's a talent question.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Oh, we're ready. We're ready.
Talent. Yeah, well...
Can we ask the question?
It is
Everyone who
a
listens
good
does know what it
question.
is, but in case there's a new listener, we probably should ask it. So, final question that we do ask to everyone is, do you think that talent is real, and how much of an impact do you think it has on an individual's success?
That is a most fantastic question.
This is my favourite question.
It is my favourite question. And I think talent is really important. And actually, I have to confess, I did ask my daughter, and you can edit that bit. But,
No, we're keeping it. You're allowed to ask for help. Right.
Phone friend,
This
it's fine.
is not an exam.
This is phone a friend. And she's a professional athlete. And she said to me, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work. Hard.
Lots of
That's
people have
it
said
again. That's it again. Oh, is this one you already know?
No.
So, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Yeah.
And I think talent is really important, but there are so many other things that influence success. Because actually people want success, because not everyone is super talented. So it's your drive, it's your determination, it's your ability to find the right trainer, to shoe your horse correctly, to use the right physio. There are so many things that influence it to create success, but talent isn't everything.
I think that's a really good answer.
Yeah.
It's really
Thank you.
it's one of the questions that I've found really comforting, because I would consider myself quite untalented. I do the job, but no one's begging me to ride their horses.
But I think also the reason we came up with the question
Yeah.
is that neither of us would say that we are
No.
talented. And I think a lot of people out there, especially younger riders in the horse world, look at people that are on the junior young rider teams, look at people that go to the Olympics and they think, oh, well, they're talented.
Yeah. I can't do that. I'm not talented. Yeah.
You can edit as much as you like. So I think with riding, there's so many things to influence. There is the jockey has to be talented and motivated, and the horse has to be talented and want to work. And I sometimes use the analogy of when people talk about success, and it's going into that dressage arena. And how I look at that is everything has to be right at that moment when they go down the centre line. So there's a mental and a physical aspect to both the horse and the rider. And depending on the age of the horse as to how long it needs a warm-up. Depending on the age of the jockey, maybe they need to also, well, they do need to do a warm-up, but they might need to do stretches in the lorry, some and I believe that rotation is really important for being in tune with the way that the horse moves. So you might want to do some thoracic rotation, you might want to do some visualization. A young horse might need lots of mental warm-up, but a short physical warm-up. Getting mental and physical for horse and rider to peak as you enter at A is quite a skill.
Mad.
I don't know if I said that right, but
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
ooh.
Anything we want to plug?
There's so much. The trouble is, I could, as I think people know, I could talk for hours about how you can help your horse. But I think what people should be aware of is using someone who is professional. And I think I'm really grateful to the people who are, no, let me get this right. I think it's really important that people use professionals who are qualified, that have the correct qualifications, the correct insurance, and do their CPD and are knowledgeable. And for my profession going forwards, and this is where I really enjoy saying this, because I'm not just singing the praises of physiotherapy, but there's an organisation called RAMP, which stands for the Register of Animal Musculoskeletal Practitioners, and that covers physiotherapists, osteopaths and chiropractors. And I think the sooner that we all work together, share techniques, because I know I steal their techniques, but share techniques and work towards the common good of the horse. And I think this is really important.
Yeah.
I finished that quite right.
Yeah.
But,
And for anyone who wants to listen to our other episodes, you can find them on, since we have mentioned them a little bit, you can find them on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I think the Android podcast store, but I don't have an Android phone, so I can't check that. The server tells me that it's on there, but
I just want to say a big thank you to Anna, because I did kind of rope you in after you came to treat my horses, and I really enjoyed how much you spoke and how knowledgeable you were. And I asked you to be on the podcast and you looked a little bit shocked. And then I had to kind of explain it and didn't really tell you what it was, and you still came on the podcast anyway.
Thank you. I would, yes, it's always very difficult when what I do is very practical, and doing it just via audio probably doesn't touch on what I want to demonstrate in gesture.
We'll make a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you do a webinar, is that when you do video? Is that when you do pictures?
Sure.
When you do,
Yeah.
come
Let's
back,
say yes.
Come back. Visit me in Badminton. Then,
Okay.
I'll find a horse to practice on.
Okay. Well, if you guys want to keep up with us, we are on Instagram at the Pony Podcast. We're on Facebook at the Pony Podcast. And if you want to suggest an episode, as we have had lots of episodes suggested to us that we are in the process of making / have made, if you go and look on our podcast stream, you can email us. You can either DM us at the other social media sites, or you can email us at theponypod@gmail.com and like, rate and subscribe and all of that stuff. All right, thanks. Bye.